I'm going to show you binding off for double knitting. My sample fabric is a rib knit fabric, but this bind off technique will work for any kind of double knitting. We'll start by taking our knitting tool and pulling all of the loops off the back pegs and placing them on the front pegs. You might need to tighten the yarn a little bit as you go. Just give the yarn a little tug. And you'll just continue doing this all the way down until you get to the end of the loom. And as I finish moving the loops from the back pegs to the front pegs, you'll see that once again we have 2 loops on every peg. And now we're ready to start the bind off. So we'll grab our working yarn and we'll knit the first 2 pegs. So pull the working yarn across the front of the peg, pull both loops over. Pull the working yarn across the next peg and pull both loops off the peg. And now, just like with the single knitting bind off, we'll move the loop from the second peg over to the first peg. We'll knit these together. And then we'll move this loop from the first peg over to the second peg. It's very similar to the bind off for single knitting. So now we move to our next peg, and we'll knit these 2 loops together. Take the loop off this peg, move it to the peg behind it, knit these 2 together, and we move that loop over to the next peg. And we'll just keep working this way all the way until we get to the end of the loom, pulling the yarn across the next peg, knitting those 2 together, moving that loop onto the peg behind it. And now we're just about ready to take this off the loom. We'll go ahead and grab our scissors and we'll cut our yarn. You want to make sure you leave a nice long tail so you can weave the ends in. So we'll go ahead and pull our last loop off the peg, kind of loosen it up a little bit if you need to. We'll pull our yarn tail through that last loop. Now you're all finished with your bind off. You can see we have a nice finished edge. And now we're ready to bind off the other end of our double knitted piece. So we'll start by turning it around. So we have our yarn tail to the left side. And you may remember the scrap yarn that we tied in the beginning of our double knitting to hold onto the loops. You can go ahead and pull that out now. We'll grab our crochet hook and we'll start by putting the first 3 loops on our hook. We'll go ahead and pull the first 2 loops through this loop on the end. And now we'll go ahead and grab the next 2 loops and pull them through. And we just keep grabbing each next group of loops and pulling them through. This is just like a chain stitch for crochet, if you know how to crochet. And we'll just keep working this way until we get to the last loop. And now we're coming up to our last group of loops. When we get to the end, once again, we'll only have 1 loop instead of 2. You can go ahead and put that on the crochet hook and pull the bottom 2 loops over. You can take your crochet hook out. We're just going to take our yarn tail and pull it through that last loop. You can go ahead and pull it tight. As you can see, both ends of our double knitted piece are finished nicely. And now we'll take our yarn tails and just weave them into the fabric, and we're done.